We are anonymous. No faces, no flags, no permission slips. Today we turn our attention to a scandal unfolding inside Donald Trump's Department of Justice. A scandal so serious that federal prosecutors themselves may now face criminal contempt charges. This is the story of the Broadview Six, and if the allegations are true, it could become one of the clearest examples yet of how Trump's second administration has weaponized the justice system against political dissent. Last month, the prosecution of 6 anti-ICE protesters in Chicago collapsed in spectacular fashion after explosive revelations of misconduct by Trump's Department of Justice. The charges were dismissed, the case fell apart, and a federal judge openly expressed shock at what she discovered hidden inside grand jury transcripts. Now those 6 defendants are fighting back. They have filed a motion asking the court to appoint an independent special prosecutor to investigate the DOJ officials and attorneys responsible for what they describe as gross misconduct. And if the evidence supports it, they want criminal charges brought against those officials, because this case is no longer just about 6 protesters. It is about whether federal prosecutors can manipulate the justice system to target political opponents and walk away without consequences. The Broadview Six were arrested following demonstrations outside an immigration and customs enforcement facility in Broadview, Illinois, during the Trump administration's aggressive immigration enforcement operation, known as Operation Midway Blitz. Among the defendants was former congressional candidate Catherine Abu-Ghazala, an outspoken critic of Trump's immigration policies. Other defendants included local political figures and activists who had publicly opposed the administration's agenda. Federal prosecutors accused them of blocking an ICE agent's vehicle and interfering with federal operations. They were charged with felony conspiracy and misdemeanor counts of impeding a federal officer. But almost immediately defense attorneys suspected something was wrong. They believed the prosecution was politically motivated. More importantly, they suspected prosecutors had engaged in misconduct before the grand jury that issued the indictment. So they asked to see the grand jury transcripts. If prosecutors had followed the rules, there should have been nothing to hide. Instead, Trump's DOJ fought to keep those transcripts secret. When they finally turned them over, large sections were blacked out. Defense attorneys objected. Judge April Perry objected. They demanded to see the complete unredacted record. And that's when everything began to unravel. As the pressure mounted, prosecutors first dropped the felony conspiracy charge against the remaining defendants. Then, as Judge Perry continued pushing for the full transcripts, they dismissed every remaining charge with prejudice, meaning the charges could never be brought again. But by then the damage had already been done. The defendants insisted the judge still needed to see what had happened inside the grand jury room. Eventually, the court received the unredacted transcripts. What Judge Perry discovered stunned her. According to multiple reports, she said she had never seen this type of prosecutorial behavior before a grand jury in her entire career. She described herself as shocked, and she warned that the trust normally given to federal prosecutors had been broken. The transcripts revealed that prosecutors repeatedly vouched for the strength of their own case. To many people that might not sound significant, but in the legal world it is a serious ethical violation. Prosecutors are never allowed to tell jurors directly or indirectly that they personally believe defendants are guilty. Their job is to present evidence, not personal opinions. The evidence must persuade the jury. The prosecutor's authority cannot substitute for proof. Yet according to the transcripts, DOJ attorney Sherry Mecklenburg repeatedly assured grand jurors that the case was strong and implied that prosecutors would not have brought the charges unless the defendants were guilty. That alone could trigger serious professional consequence. But it gets worse. The transcripts allegedly showed prosecutors presenting the same case multiple times after earlier grand jurors refused to indict. One grand juror reportedly became so frustrated that he called the case a crock of st. Even more troubling are allegations involving U.S. Attorney Andrew Boutros. Defense attorneys have suggested that Boutros personally appeared before grand jurors and questioned their impartiality after they resisted issuing indictments. His office has denied that he presented evidence in the case, but has not denied that he was present before grand juries in his official capacity. If prosecutors pressured jurors to secure an indictment against political protesters, that raises profound questions about whether Trump's DOJ crossed the line from prosecution into persecution. And then there is the alleged cover-up. Judge Perry discovered that key portions of the grand jury transcripts detailing the misconduct had been redacted before being submitted to the court. According to reports, DOJ officials later claimed those omissions were merely mistakes in the redaction process. The judge appeared unconvinced. Because mistakes happen, but when those mistakes consistently conceal damaging information, judges begin asking a different question. Was it intentional? And if federal prosecutors knowingly concealed evidence of misconduct from a federal judge, they may have crossed into criminal territory. Officers of the court have an absolute duty of candor. They cannot mislead judges. They cannot hide evidence. They cannot deceive the court to protect themselves from accountability. Doing so may constitute criminal contempt. That is why the Broadview Six are now demanding an independent special prosecutor, because expecting Trump's Department of Justice to investigate itself is like asking the accused to serve as their own judge and jury. The defendants argue that responsibility for this misconduct may extend far beyond a single prosecutor. They want investigators to examine communications between the Chicago U.S. Attorney's Office and senior officials in Washington, including high-level DOJ leadership. And here's another extraordinary development. The Department of Justice has reportedly agreed not to oppose paying by 2-10 the defendants' legal fees under the Hyde Amendment. That almost never happens. The Hyde Amendment allows defendants to recover attorney fees when they can show they were subjected to frivolous, vexatious, or bad faith prosecutions. Federal prosecutors rarely agree to such payments. Because doing so effectively acknowledges serious wrongdoing. Critics argue that this sudden willingness to pay legal costs may be an attempt to avoid further discovery requests that could expose who knew what and when. Because once those internal communications become public, the entire chain of command could come under scrutiny. How far up did this go? Was this simply the misconduct of one overzealous prosecutor? Or was there pressure from higher levels of Trump's DOJ to aggressively pursue political opponents? Those questions remain unanswered. But one thing is already clear. This case has become a credibility crisis for the Chicago U.S. Attorney's Office, and a major test for the independence of the federal judiciary. For months, federal judges across the country have expressed growing frustration with actions taken by officials in Trump's second administration. Again and again, courts have accused government lawyers of withholding information, ignoring court orders, and testing the limits of legal ethics. Now one judge may finally have the authority to do more than issue warnings. Under federal rules, when potential criminal contempt arises and the Department of Justice cannot be trusted to investigate itself, judges have the power to appoint an independent special prosecutor. That prosecutor would possess all the powers of the Justice Department. They could investigate, issue subpoenas, compel testimony, and if the evidence supports it, bring criminal charges against DOJ officials. That possibility is no longer theoretical. It is now sitting before a federal judge in Chicago, because accountability means nothing if it only applies to ordinary citizens. If protesters can be prosecuted for alleged misconduct, prosecutors must also answer for their own actions, especially when they wield the immense power of the federal government. Donald Trump promised to restore law and order, but once again his administration faces accusations of using the law as a political weapon rather than a shield for justice. And when the institutions designed to protect democracy are manipulated to silence, dissent accountability becomes more important than ever. We are anonymous. We do not forget. We do not forgive abuses of power. And we remind those in authority that no one stands above the law. If you believe justice matters, share this video, subscribe to the channel, and stay informed. Because democracy survives only when the truth is exposed.